Created with free version for non-commercial use.
In this lesson, we will learn about heading elements and the role that they play in giving our web pages structure and creating hierarchy amongst our content. In front of you is an example page that I've created for this lesson. For just a moment, let's pretend that this is not a web page. Let's pretend that it isn't written in HTML, and let's instead just pretend that this is a printed page in a book. Now let's give ourselves an exercise. Let's try to identify the different sections that make up this page. And let's really pay attention to the contextual clues that headings give us when trying to identify sections. So for example, the first section that I would identify would be this paragraph. This seems like the intro section because it sits directly under the largest heading. If we scroll down a bit, I would then say the next overall section is all of this content, because we can see that the next set of largest headings on the page are key point and key point. And this is the end of the page. So to me, this seems like a section that is made up of a subsection and a subsection, and then this is the other main section. Very quickly, let's review the entire page again. So I would say that this is the intro section. I would say that this is a main section. And I would say that this is another main section. Now the only clue that I'm going off of when trying to determine what's a section is the headings. Authors of physical books do this all the time. They use different levels of headings to create hierarchy to keep the content organized so it's easier to digest and understand. Well, web pages are no different. Web developers use headings to keep content organized. So let's take a jump into our text editor, and you can see that our page begins with a heading level 1. So that's this, and we've covered this in earlier lessons. You've seen H1 many times. But I want to talk about the way that we create hierarchy. So you'll also remember from one of our earliest lessons that I mentioned that H2 is a slightly less important heading than an H1. And we can see that reflected. Key point is smaller than this H1 subject heading. But then if we go down a bit, we can see that minor point is using an H3, which is right here. And we can see that very minor point is using an H4, which is here. And then obviously if this key point used an H2 down at the bottom, this key point also uses an H2. Overall, this page has used 4 different heading levels. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now you may recall that in an earlier lesson, I mentioned that HTML offers H1 all the way to H6. So 6 different heading levels that you can use to create structure and organization in your pages. Now, even though HTML offers H1 all the way through H6, that doesn't mean we need to use all 6 different heading levels. In fact, we will learn in future lessons that the most recent version of HTML, HTML5, encourages us to structure our pages in a way that we will probably only ever use H1 elements. But we will cross that bridge when we come to it. So until we learn about different ways to organize sections in our pages, I want you to use as many different heading levels as your content demands. Because coding patterns and best practices change over time. But using headings to organize content, that's timeless. That's why I encouraged you earlier to think of this as a printed page in a book. The key is to simply create organized, easy to digest content. I'll see you in the next lesson.
Created with free version for non-commercial use.